Manish Tiwari is now joining us live. He's a Congress MP, now joins us live. Manish, your first up reaction, the opposition is sure hitting out of the Prime Minister or addressing the economic concerns that were not mentioned in his speech, but the Prime Minister did go ahead and mention wait till tomorrow. There's a proper guideline that is coming out. Maybe a bit too soon to react at the moment, Manish?
Well, we've just done a detailed briefing from the All India Congress Committee with regard to what we heard from the Prime Minister. In fact, as a spokesperson of the party, it is I who did the briefing. And we've clearly enunciated and articulated that while we can understand the constraints to extend this lockdown by another 19 days, because that's essentially what the sense one got after the Prime Minister's meeting with the Chief Ministers, and that's what the epidemiologists and other people have been saying. What we expected to hear from the Prime Minister was what the government is doing for the people. Whenever the Prime Minister speaks, what you hear from him is what he expects the country to do. What you don't hear from the Prime Minister is what is the government doing for the country. And I think that's the missing link in the Prime Minister's articulation. For example, the most
Manish Tiwari, just to play devil's advocate over here, not refuting what you're saying even for a second. Yes, the people wanted more. Yes, the people wanted to know, industries, SMEs, MSMEs wanted to know what are the kind of tax breaks, how are they going to hold on to their employees, what is the kind of push that they're getting in terms of working capital requirement as well. A lot of demands have been made. A lot of voices from the lockdown is something that we've been picking up all this while, and these are answers probably that the industry required as well. But having said that, the Prime Minister made it amply clear. Wait for the guideline that is coming out tomorrow. Perhaps there is a mention of all of that in the guideline as well. We probably need to just wait and watch to see what he comes up with, because at the moment, the Prime Minister's priority seems to be saving lives over anything else.
Well, again, you missed the wood for the trees. When you interrupted me, I was trying to submit. And I would like to request you that once you ask the question, please have the magnanimity to hear the answer in its entirety.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Manish Tiwari. Manish Tiwari, go ahead.
Those are the rules of engagement which I think must be followed.
All right, Manish, this is not a personal attack. Go ahead.
The most horrifying image of the entire lockdown was the mass migration of the poor and the impoverished from our cities trying to head back to their home and hearth in the countryside. Now you've decided, or the government decided, in its wisdom, to quarantine them. This exodus took place on the 28th, 29th of March. Now, 14 days of that quarantine, which is mandatory in terms of the Infectious Diseases Act of 1897 and the Disaster Management Act under which this lockdown is being enforced, are over. Now, those people who do not test positive, what are you doing in order to facilitate them to go back home? Are you would the government keep them against their will? If they've left out the mandatory period of quarantine and they have tested negative, would you then confine them against their will in those quarantine camps? I think that's the single biggest, most germane question on which not only state governments but even local authorities are looking for guidance from the government of India. Number two, with regard to a disease on which there is no vaccine at the moment, the only real cure is preemption and prevention. The epidemiological advice across the world is that till the time you do not test in appropriate measure, you will not be able to really identify the incidence of disease and thus be able to contain it. Therefore, you see, a lockdown serves two purposes. A lockdown helps to break the incubation cycle of the disease and gives time to the government to be able to ramp up the infrastructure.
So
while
ideally, Manish, if you were in that position, what is the kind of decision that you would have taken differently? I do know that Sonia Gandhi has also given out a very solid proposal. She has enlisted certain things that the government of the day can do. If you were in that position, what would you have announced differently than what the Prime Minister did? Because that would also entail what your exact expectations are from the ruling dispensation.
So first of all, I would have said that the single biggest challenge that we have to deal with is the question of internal migration. I would have spelt out a roadmap, would have used these days after the 27th, 28th of March to work out a detailed plan in consultation with the states. The states where the migrants are currently being held, and their receiving states, which is essentially UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, the hinterland states, and see as to what is the pathway which can facilitate their return to their respective home earth, because that's why they decided to leave their places of work, in order to try and get back home. So that's the single biggest humanitarian question which this country confronts, and on that you expected that there would be a roadmap which the government would unveil. Number two, on the question of testing, that what is the strategy of the government in consultation with the states with regard to testing? That needed to be spelled out. Number three, what is equally important is that in the past 21 days, since you've decided to centralize procurement, how much personal protection equipment have you really been able to procure? How much and how has it been distributed to states? Has it gone to our frontline health workers? How many frontline health workers have been identified across the country? How many of them we've been able to equip? These are the kind of things which give people confidence that we have a government.
So, Manish, you're saying that you wanted these specifics coming in from the Prime Minister, which you thought was conspicuously missing from his address this morning at 10 a.m. As far as people at large are concerned, you spoke about the migrant laborers, you spoke about the daily wage workers as well, you spoke about the poor. But as far as the middle class is concerned, the salaried are concerned, the corporates are concerned as well, they're also having a problem as far as the working capital requirement is concerned, to be able to allow the employees to continue without a pay cut or sacking them as well. Somewhere do you think that part needed to be addressed on a war footing, given that we are getting several reports of how people are getting impacted with the job losses and pay cuts? And that's creating a bit of a panic.
Well, I entirely agree with you. The Prime Minister, in his earlier address, had appealed to employers across this country that at this point in time, they should not be retrenching people. The Ministry of Labour, in fact, wrote to all employers that this is not the time to look at your bottom lines. This is the time to look at your employees with compassion. The Prime Minister repeated it today. But you are aware of what is happening in your own industry, what is happening in the media industry, the way people are being laid off. So what this country wanted to hear from the Prime Minister is that those employers who at this point in time are going to prioritize their bottom lines rather than the welfare of their employees, how is the government going to deal with them? And concurrently, what is the kind of bailout package which the government is contemplating? Because if you look at countries around the world, their bailout packages are about 5% of their GDP. What we've put in place at this point in time is only 1% of our GDP, is 1,70,000 crores. How is the government going to ramp it up? How is it going to be distributed across the sectors so that economic activity can kickstart? Because you see, what these last 21 days have demonstrated is our complete vulnerability as a nation. It is, in fact, only on the strength of our grit that we are getting through. It should not be that after another 90 days, in addition to COVID-19, the most vulnerable sections of this of society actually start staring at the specter of starvation, and that too at a point in time when your granaries are overflowing, when FCI has no place to stock food grains, when there's a bumper harvest coming in, so obviously there is a supply chain which needs to be put in place, a distribution mechanism which needs to be streamlined, rationalized, so that you can reach the last man and the last row. And those are the kind of things, that these are the 7 things. The Prime Minister said, Satpati, that you need to do this. The Prime Minister should have also said that these are the 7 things which the government has done in the past 21 days.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And absolutely, Manish Tiwari, some of what you're saying is resonating quite a bit from the voices that we're getting from the lockdown as well. Questions that people are asking. Quite a bit of what you've said is resonating with the larger sentiment right there. But I also would like to add that let's wait for the proper guidelines to come out tomorrow. I appreciate you very much for joining us on this broadcast. Manish Tiwari, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Getting some breaking news. Let's go across.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.